Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to create a simple layout using cascading style sheets or CSS within Dreamweaver. So CSS is a styling language that allows you to set properties such as width, height, color, background color, fonts, etc. for all the content elements on your HTML page. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to create this simple HTML page that has a header, 3 columns, a section with a heading and a paragraph, a footer, and also a fixed position element at the top that does not move when you scroll. So you will learn how to make full width header and footer elements that go from end to end of your browser window. You will learn how to limit your content and text so that it stays within a narrow portion at the center of your screen and stays in the center no matter how your screen resizes. So this way your layout will look good on many different computer screens. You will learn how to create elements that sit side by side on your page, and you will learn how to create spacing around and between them. You'll also learn how to overlap elements using negative spacing. And finally, you will learn how to make fixed position elements that do not scroll when the page scrolls. So let's get started. Now I have this demo page already set up in Dreamweaver, but I'm going to recreate it in this video to show you how exactly I did it. So I'm going to start by creating a new HTML page, and I'll save it. So where I've put my first name, you're going to replace it with yours, but you'll keep the rest of the file name the same. So in the Files tab, you can now see layout with CSS underscore hardeep.html, which sits in the same folder as the basic HTML file that we created in the previous project. Now, along with this HTML file, I'm going to create a style sheet or a CSS file that holds all the style definitions for this page. So the HTML file holds the content and the structure, while the CSS file defines the look and feel, and the two put together create the final look and feel of your web page. To create a CSS file that is assigned to this page, so it'll hold all the styles for this page, here's what I do. I go up to the Css Designer tab. Now your Css Designer, when you first open Dreamweaver, will probably look like this. It's a one-column layout with many different tabs. To make some more room in the Css Designer and to make styling easier, I'm going to expand this column till it splits into 2 columns. And this will make it much more convenient for us to work with our style definitions. First things first, I have to add a source that'll hold all my styles. In this case, I'm adding a separate file called a CSS file. So I can click plus here and say create a new CSS file. And when I click that, it's asking me what's the name of the file. So I'm going to type in add as link is the default, and as you saw in my handout, you can link the same CSS file to many web pages, and by changing the style once, you will affect the look and feel of all HTML pages. This is a more efficient way to work, so we're going to leave it as link. Click OK. Now, here you see under Sources, layout.css. If I go over to Files, you will see that layout.css has been created as a separate file, and it sits in the same folder as my layout with CSS HTML page. And let's start by adding some content to this page. So I'm going to click in the design view up top so I can see my cursor flashing there, and then I go to Insert, Header. So Dreamweaver asks me where I want to insert it. I'm going to leave this as default. And at this point, I'm not assigning any of these to my header, just inserting a default header. I click OK, and Dreamweaver inserts a box, and it contains some default text that says content for new header tag goes here. If you look at your code section, it inserted the header inside the page body. So here's my header. I'm going to set a few styles for this header, such as background color, width, height, and so on. So to create styles that define the look and feel of your elements, you select the element, go into the Css Designer. We already have a source, which is our Css file. So the next step to define the look and feel of this header is to create a selector for it. A selector is like an address that helps the web browser to find what is it that we are trying to style. I have my header selected. I'm just going to click plus under selectors, and Dreamweaver inserts a selector that says body header. It's like an address in reverse. When you write your home address, you write the street name first, and then the city, and then the state. These addresses in the selector are in reverse. So body header means a header that is contained inside my page body. So the smaller element is listed later and the larger element is listed first. So body header is the selector that Dreamweaver assigned. Now since I will have only one header on my page, I don't even need to be so specific. I could even remove the word body and leave my selector saying just header, and it would still work. So you've defined a selector. The next step is to define its look and feel. This happens in the Properties section. Properties includes many sections within itself, like layout that has width, height, and so on, text, which contains text color, font family, font size, and so on, borders, backgrounds, and more. I'm going to start with layout. I'll start by defining the width. As you can see in my finished page, I want my header to be full width. How do I do that? Come back to Dreamweaver. I have my header selected, and under Properties, I will type 100%. This is a way of saying full width. I will double click on the height, and I want my header to be about 200 to 300 pixels high. So I'm going to type 200 px, which is short for pixels, and hit enter. Now watch what happens on the left side. This box that represents my header expanded, so it's full width and it's 200 pixels high. Next, I'm going to give it a background color so that I can see it on the page. So I go up to the background section of CSS, click on background color, and then choose a color and hit enter. As soon as I chose a background color, now I see my header has been filled with that color. So now I can save this file and test it out. But now that my HTML and CSS are separate files, instead of just saving one of them, I have to save both. And this is easily done in Dreamweaver if you go up to File and click Save All. So both my HTML and my CSS files have been saved. Let me go and preview this. And this is what my page looks like. I went in and added a header. You'll notice that in the finished page, the blue color of my header goes all the way to the edge. Whereas in this page, there's a little white margin on the left, right, and top. Now I'll show you how to remove that. This white margin comes from the page body. By default, the page body in different browsers is given a different amount of space, about 10 pixels or so, of empty space around it. Because I want my header to look clean and flush with the edge of my window, I'm going to change that property now. Okay, back in Dreamweaver, I need to style the page body itself. As you can see in my code, the body tag. This can have styles of its own, and one of those styles is this white margin that we see all around the header. In order to style my page body, I first have to create a selector for it. So in my CSS Designer, I'm still on my layout.css, which is my only source of styles. I come down to selectors and click plus. And Dreamweaver adds a selector for body. I hit enter, and now I can go about adding properties to my page body. I'm only going to do one, which is all the space around the sides of the page body. That comes from the margin property. Margin in CSS is the space around an element, the empty space. You can have top margin, right margin, bottom and left margin. I want all of these to be set to 0 pixels. I know Dreamweaver shows 0 pixels here, but right now nothing is set. I want to set all 4 numbers to be 0 pixels. The quickest way to do that is to come to the center, click the chain link. When you see the chain link, it means all 4 of these values will be the same. So I just need to set one and the others will automatically match. So I could go to any one of these 4. In this case, I'll go to the top margin, double click. It already says 0 pixels. I just need to confirm that I want 0 pixels. So I hit enter. Now the 0 pixel margin is confirmed for all 4 sides, and if you look here in the design view, the white margin around my header is gone. Let me save all and go back and reload my page. So the white margin is gone. The next step to finishing my header is to add a content area within, inside which I'm going to type this text. This is a header. I'm going to click inside my page header. I can do that here in the design view, or I can do that down here in the code view by clicking right between the header and /header tags. If you're doing this in code view, you want to be very careful that your cursor is not sitting inside any tag, but it's sitting between the tags. So once you know that your cursor is in the right place, I'm going to go ahead and insert a simple element. The default element in HTML that can be styled with CSS is called a div. It's the most common kind of element. I go up to Insert and click Div. Now Dreamweaver asks me where do I want to insert it. It's going to be at my insertion point, which means wherever my cursor is. And in this case, I'm going to give this a class. Now classes and IDs are ways to assign selective names to my page elements, including divs, so that I can assign very specific styles to them that no other page elements will have. The div that I'm about to add is like an inner content area within my header. So I'm going to assign it a class that simply says header-inner. Now just like with our HTML and CSS file names, we do not want spaces inside our class names also, so you can use hyphens or underscores. So with header-inner typed out, in the class box, I'm going to hit enter, and as soon as I do, Dreamweaver creates a box, gives it some default text. Content for class header inner goes here. And now look down here in the code. Inside the header, Dreamweaver has added a div, and as you can see, it has a class, and the class is header inner. Now I'm going to go into this div and replace this default text with this is a header. And with my cursor inside this div, I'm going to add a selector for it so I can style it. So I come over to the CSS Designer and click on plus to add a selector. As soon as I do, I get a new selector, a kind that we haven't seen before. It starts with a dot or a period. A dot is a way to say this is a class name. So dot header dash inner means this selector selects all elements that have the class header dash inner. I'm going to hit enter, and now I can give it some properties. So what properties do I want for my header inner box? So I'll show you in my finished page here. My header is full width, but my header inner box is about 800 pixels wide, and it automatically center aligns within the header. So even if I go ahead and change my window size, you'll notice that header inner automatically centers itself. This is the reason why I wanted to add a box or a div inside my header to hold the content. Because my browser window could be really wide, but it's really hard to read your text going across a wide screen. So it's good to have a limitation, a box inside your full width elements that holds all your text and content. This way your colors and your graphics can go across the whole window, but your text and all your reading material sits in the middle. And no matter what I do to the browser window, it always centers itself. So how do I do this with CSS? I've basically taken this div called header inner, and I've set its width to 800 pixels, and I've used a CSS trick called auto margins to automatically center it. And I'll show you how to do that now. So here I have my header inner div. In my CSS Designer, let me expand it a bit, I already have a selector that I just added for header inner. So the trick to centering it is this. First, assign it a width. So I'm going to double click and say 800px, which is 800 pixels, and then I come down to margin, and on the left margin I click where it says pixels, and from the drop down I choose auto. And then I go to the right margin and do the same. I click and choose auto. After setting the width to 800 pixels and the left and right margins to auto, here's what I see. My header inner box has resized itself to 800 pixels, and now it has automatic margins on the left and right that are exactly the same. As I stretch my window, these margins grow so that the header inner box always stays in the middle. As I shrink my window, the margins shrink, but the header inner box always stays in the middle. So this is a very common way of formatting your content using HTML and CSS, where you have one element that stretches across the whole window that gives your page that nice, luxurious, and expanded feel, but then within that you have invisible boxes that hold your content in a reasonable width so that your site visitors can have an easy time reading your text. I'm going to change the font size and color of my text in the header. Since my background is blue, I would like to have my text white and also nice and big. So I open up my CSS Designer. I go to Header. I go to the text properties and change the color to white. I'll also change the font size to 36 pixels and change the font family to this one. I can also change the font weight to bold. And after all those changes, you can see what happened to my header text. I'll get into typography with CSS more in the next lesson, but this was just a quick introduction to how you can easily style your text using CSS. I also want to create a little more space above my header inner div. So margin is one way of creating space. As you just saw, you can have auto margins, and earlier we had some margins around the page body which we set to 0. Another way to create space in your elements is called padding. Just like margin is space around an element, padding is space inside an element. So in my page header, I'm going to add a top padding. So with my header selector chosen, I go to the layout properties, scroll down to padding, and this time I don't want the chain selected. So you can see the chain is broken. That means I can independently set different padding values on all sides. All I'm interested in right now is a little top padding. So I'll double click on the top padding and give it about 60 pixels. Now watch what happens. Not only did Dreamweaver add 60 pixels above the header text, but the overall height of my header increased. So this is to show you that margins and paddings will add to the width and height properties that you set up here. So my height is actually 200 pixels, but this padding of 60 gets added to the 200 pixels, so my effective height of my header has now gone up to 260 pixels. I'm going to go ahead and save all, go back to my browser, to this page, and then reload. And this is my header. As you can see, if I resize my window, the margin on the left automatically shrinks. The margin on the right is also shrinking, it's just that we can't see it. But basically all my text area will remain in the center of the page with a width of 800 pixels. So this completes all the styles of my header. In the next video, I'll go ahead and add the middle section of the page.